Welcome. Welcome to our second event of the year, guys. Glad to see so many new faces here. For those who don't know me, my name is Ziad Abdelnour. I'm President and CEO of Black Hawk Partners and founder and chairman of the Financial Policy Council. What are we doing here every 2 months? We gather and we talk and look, I mean, at the end of the day, as they say, the ultimate revenge is obscene wealth. We're here for one thing only. We're here to empower people, educate people, and create wealth. Whatever the asset class is, whether in real estate, emerging markets, art, collectibles, stocks, bonds, oil, gold, commodities, whatever it is. This is what matters. This is the mission of this organization, is to empower people, educate people, and make money. Create a club, a fraternity of wealth creators, of deal makers. Empower the next generation. There's nothing wrong in making wealth. There's nothing wrong in being a capitalist. Unlike a lot of people in the government, old government, or liberal establishment makes you believe. We're not a political organization. Don't misunderstand me. We're a 501c3, but we like to promote capitalism, free enterprise, wealth creation, all these issues. This is what the Financial Policy Council is all about. And we welcome any one of you who wants to sponsor a topic, talk about something. Please be my guest. Come in here, use this as a platform. So we do like 5 events a year. We write a lot of blogs, research, we have a lot of proprietary information. We're a 501c3 still. And we like also to do once a year to co-sponsor or work with another organization whose chairman is right here. It's called Freedom Fest. Mark Schoen. I will introduce in a second, Mark. Freedom Fest is one of the highest profile events in the year, happens in Vegas from July 19th to 22nd. Around 2,000, 3,000 attendees, 200 speakers. Also, same goals, trying to promote free enterprise, wealth creation, capitalism. Mark, maybe you could talk a bit about Freedom Fest, because we're working on this together, talk about your event in July, and then we can come back to that. It's very important that you understand, we're really working with similar like-minded organizations, trying to promote this message. This message is very important. But at the end of the day, remember one thing, we're trying here to buy influence. You can have all the money in the world. If you don't have influence, your message will not come across. It's money making, influence buying, and getting the younger generation to think like this rather than think the opposite in government handouts and stuff like that. Mark, could you please talk for a few minutes here about the Freedom Fest?
Thank you very much, Ziad. It's a real pleasure to be here. Ziad and I have been on this stage a few times, and we had a bull and bear debate, and he's just tremendous. I really appreciate this opportunity. Well, Freedom Fest is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Every year we have a theme, and the themes have varied from year to year. So a couple years ago, when the Tea Party movement got started, we said, are we headed for a new American Revolution or a French Revolution? Then we had, when things were looking bad with the financial crisis, we had a thesis, are we Rome? Are we headed down the way of Rome, decline and fall? Another one is Big Brother here. A lot of concern about big government and intruding in our lives. So this year, with the President of the United States being a businessman, whether you think you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump, and in fact, every year we have a major debate on Trump, pro and con, and it's the closest we get to an uncivil debate. But so our theme this year is New Frontiers on the Free Enterprise. Now, the reason we use the term free enterprise is because As you can see on our brochure, the keynote speaker this year is William Shatner of Star Trek fame, of the Enterprise. So we thought, New Frontiers on the Free Enterprise. How can business make a difference in changing government to make, you know, for business, what is our mantra? Cheaper and better. Cheaper and better. But for some reason, government has struggles on both counts of being cheap and better. Perhaps a business approach can solve this problem. So what we try to do at Freedom Fest is have an opportunity to see if we can make a difference. Steve Forbes is our ambassador to Freedom Fest. And he normally gives his speech. I'll never forget the first time I invited Steve Forbes to speak. He's a personal friend. I said, would you speak? And he said, yes. His secretary said, yes. I said, well, how long can he stay? Can he stay for the full 3 days? Oh, no, Mark, you don't understand. Mr. Forbes is very busy. He flies in, gives a speech, signs a few books, and flies back to New York the very same day. I said, well, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that. So I gave up on Steve Forbes staying until a week later, Jackie, his secretary, calls and says, Mr. Forbes has reviewed your schedule, and he's changed his schedule to be there all 3 days. And he's been there all 3 days, every time, because as he said, Freedom Fest is where the best ideas and best policies are worked out, and we can solve these problems. So people are very upbeat as a result of Freedom Fest. So it's philosophy, history, science, and technology. You all have the brochure. We are offering a special code, FPC, the code for our conference. And you get $100 off if you sign up, and we have information on the back on how you can do that, either by calling us with the 800, the toll-free number, or you can fill it out on the back and just hand it to me. And we'd love to see you at Freedom Fest. We're going to have over 2,000 people there. Ziad, who is one of the world's experts on oil, is going to be on our main stage presentation. And we're just delighted to have Ziad and 200 other experts that you can see listed here. It's really going to be a lot of fun. Thank you all very much.
No, Mark, I think you took some out. Mark, you took some of my forms. It's okay. It's okay. Yep. Thank you, guys. So, without further delays, let's go back on the topic of today, guys. So today we're going to talk about investing in art and collectibles and luxury items. That's the asset class we're going to be talking about today. And we have 4 experts here on the panel. Mrs. Dorian Bergen, number 2 here. Colleen Boyle. Laura Doyle. And Jason Schoen. So I'm not going to go and read the bio of each one of you. Why don't each one of you goes 2 minutes introducing yourself, please, to the audience. This is how it works. I'm going to be asking them some specific questions, trying to grill them as much as I can. After all, they are the experts. They should be able to answer everything. Then we're going to go and engage in a conversation between you, the audience, and them. You can ask them any questions you want. And we're going to try to make it as interactive as we can, to make it really compelling. You can ask any questions. We're not trying to do some political correctness here. On the contrary, the more controversial the questions, the better it is. Because at the end of the day, what matters is you knowing as much as you can after this event about investing in art and collectibles and how do you make money. That's it. At the end of the day, it's how do you make money? That's what matters. Our dream is every one of you, each one of you, to become a millionaire or a billionaire. That's all what matters. All the rest is for the birds. This is not educational here. This is not for education. Education for the sake of knowing how to make money. That's what matters. So, why don't we start with you, Colleen?
You start first. With
Telling a bit about yourself, about the audience.
Okay. My name's Colleen Boyle, and I'm Senior Vice President with a company called Pall Mall Art Advisors. We are not affiliated with the cigarette manufacturer. We are actually an appraisal and advisory firm specializing in what we call tangible asset management, which includes art, jewelry, wine, collector cars, memorabilia, the list goes on and on. And while we're going to talk tonight about art as an investment, one thing I'd like to start off the discussion with is what we call wealth as a hidden asset. And that's what we encounter day in and day out when we're working with clients, is that you actually might already have objects of value, you just don't know it. I'm going to share a story with you. I have a client who I was working with actually down in the southern part of the United States. They had a secondary property and had a lovely collection of American art. They also had a significant collection of silver. And I was brought in to help the client understand the value of the collection, mostly the painting, for equitable distribution purposes, because they had two heirs. So on the wall was one painting by an artist named William Merritt Chase, a very, very well-known American artist. On their insurance policy, the artwork was insured for under $20,000, and it was an original piece because it had been inherited 17 years ago, and on the estate appraisal, that was the figure. So that got transferred over to the insurance policy. Well, at the conclusion of the research, that one piece was worth a little less than $1 million. So there's a lot of issues now involved. So you have a piece that started at under 20, it's now worth close to $1 million. Who gets the piece? There's only two heirs. The insurance obviously is not
but I'm
correct.
sorry, Colleen. This was supposed to be just an introduction about yourself.
Oh, sorry.
So
I was
let's
just going
not,
to share a little bit about the preface. So although we're going to talk about art as an investment, I want you to keep in mind as well that you actually might already have some objects already in your collection that might be of wealth, and you might just not know it.
Thank you. Dorian, just please an introduction about yourself. Then we can talk about all this stuff.
I have one sentence. I'm the co-owner, along with my husband Jeffrey, of ACA Galleries that was founded in 1932. And it's now 4 generations. When the gallery started, there were 30 galleries in New York City, and now, as you know, there's thousands of galleries. So that's my perspective, an old gallery that specializes in American, mostly American and European and contemporary art.
Thank you. Jason?
My turn. So I want to thank everyone. It's nice to be in Pittsburgh. I haven't been here. Anyway, I've been traveling so much. I thought I normally don't write these things. It's so tacky. But it's good to be in New York City.
Yep.
So just a little about myself. I eat, I drink, and I sleep art. So if any of you don't like art, you're going to find me a very boring person. I've been collecting art since 1980. This endeavor has provided business relationships throughout the country. As I know dealers and auction houses from Maine to Florida to California and Washington State, I have seen virtually everything, such as the same painting on the market at auction over and over again, the highs and lows of the art market. This includes a prior crash in contemporary art, which we'll talk about, fakes, disguise, condition problems, misleading, provenance, bad paintings, good paintings, great paintings, and iconic paintings. 2 publications have been done on my collection, one on paintings and the other on works on paper. So I have a very diverse interest. One was in 2003, one was in 2007, which focuses on American art of the 1930s and 40s, an aspect of American modernism. Individual paintings have been discussed in several articles and referenced in various studies on American art, these publications. I came into collecting as an art historian with an art degree from the University of Texas at Austin.
Jason,
What?
please do me a favor.
Too much?
Put this paper there.
Yes.
Don't read anything. Just say whatever comes to your mind. Make it very natural, nothing scripted. Go ahead, my friend.
So as a result of my interest and my experience as an art historian, I also work as an art advisor. And that's the depth of these visual experiences and art experiences that I have brought to the table.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much. Laura, my dear.
So I lead the Fine Art and Collections practice at Chubb. We insure some of the world's largest private collections. And that includes everything from fine and decorative art to jewelry, sports memorabilia, collector cars, basically anything that you can collect, we would love to insure. Our clients range from those that are just starting to collect up to multi-billion-dollar collections. So it gives us a really interesting perspective on the market. I underwrite those large collections, and then I also consult directly with clients on managing the risks that come with those items. So everything from art security systems to disaster planning to museum loans. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you very much. Okay, before we start here, I got a bit rushed with Freedom Fest and stuff like that. I really would like to thank very much every single board member of the Flourished Policy Council who made this happen. So board members, please, if you could stand up for a big applause, please. Thank you guys. I would also like to thank our 17 sponsors. We actually, as of today, we have 17 sponsors backing the Flourished Policy Council, hopefully more in the years to come. And more specifically, Chubb Insurance and KRA Agency for sponsoring this specific event. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Matt, for your support. Much appreciated. All right. Let's go through some questions here. I'm going to make it short. I'm going to ask some questions. You're going to have also the chance to ask your questions.
I'm going to tell them.
Whatever is on your mind.
I'm going to enter them.
Now, why the hell should I invest in the art and collectibles asset class? I'm offered so many opportunities in oil and gas, in real estate, in technology, in AI, in software, in this. Why should I bother? Don't tell me diversification of portfolio. This is the most boring question I want to ever answer, I want to ever hear. It's not portfolio diversification. And frankly, you don't make money diversifying your portfolio. You make money by putting all your eggs in one basket and watching this basket very carefully. So why should I invest in the art and collectible asset class? I mean, other than I like how they look. I mean, if I want to make money, why should I invest in that? What are the returns of this asset class versus comparable asset classes in the last 2, 3, 5 years? And then we can talk about the risk and all that kind of stuff. But please, if you could give me some
Ziad,
guidance here.
I want to say something first.
Thank you, please.
We spoke among ourselves, and I understand that this panel is about investing in art. However, I first want to say that the true intrinsic value of a work of art is the true love and understanding of these precious objects. Collecting art and other luxury items, it could be art, jewelry, cars, high fashion, music, even music, is really about the warm, deep feelings that swell up inside you when you experience what you're looking at. This really has to be the first thing that it's all about. It's magical. It's not about money, it's about magic. Mm-hmm. So masterworks have been valued by society since art's first inception, probably the hands on the cave paintings in the caves, mm-hmm. where it was tied to both spiritual and emotional power. This is really why people collect anything. That said, Professor Michael Moses at NYU has done an exhaustive study looking at fine art as an asset class. You can look it up, the May Moses Fine Art Index. So when compared to more traditional assets like stocks and bonds and silver and gold, certain art performed much better over time and was found to be the best class, certain ones. So it's no wonder that the aristocracy of the world formed extraordinary collections. The mighty power of the Carnegies, the Fricks, the Mellons, the Rockefellers, they gathered art from all eras across the globe and brought them to America. There's a reason for that, and it truly is the real value of art. So it's really been, it's the love, the passion, the understanding, as Jason has said, it's about the passion of that these miraculous objects really propel the marketplace, not the other way around. So right now before you, there's going to be 4 views of the art world. And it's going to include buying, selling, collecting, curating, appraising, and insuring. So we hope you leave here with a deeper appreciation of the true complexities of the world of art.
Okay.
So let's have some fun.
Okay.
But I'm going to add on to
1
it.
second. Yeah, if you're on a few, please. I don't want anybody to read anything.
This is the only thing I wrote, but I
Good.
had to be on message.
Good. No script,
I
no
had to
nothing.
be on
It has to
message
come
that
from
the
the
whole
heart.
Let me
reason-
throw something
I
out.
don't want anything prepared.
That's the only thing I prepared.
Thank you.
So can I throw something out here?
Yes.
Okay. So this notion of investing in art
Yes.
often can cloud the objective. It's a very interesting thing, but at the same time, from my own standpoint, when I collected and I formed a collection, I never looked at art as an investment. The byproduct of collecting properly, the end result was what I did was a great investment. But you know,
It's a very good point.
it's absolutely, because when you invest, right, and if the whole objective is invest, your vision is clouded. You can't see straight. You know, in the art world, there's always a great buy. There's always 50% off, right? But the real objective is to get the rare, great object and capture that.
Perfect. Get it.
And if I can add on-
Let's get we good.
Why-
Let's keep it short answers, just like that.
Okay, you
I'm
know?
going to add on to,
Yes.
I'm going to add on to some
If
ideas.
not,
that-
I'm really going to get bored. Go ahead, Colleen.
So this idea of investing,
Go ahead, Colleen.
it's exactly what Dorian and Jason said. Don't think of it as much as making an investment. Think of it as doing your due diligence. And if you do your due diligence and you buy smart and you buy accurately, there's a real high probability that you will have a better return than not in the future. If you don't go through the due diligence process and buy wisely, there's a really good chance you're going to lose money, whether it's art, jewelry, collectibles, wine, cars, any of these luxury classes. And that's definitely what we see in the marketplace. Not everybody buys smart.
Perfect. Talking about due diligence, what type of due diligence should you initiate before purchasing artwork? Keep it short. What type exactly of due diligence? 1, 2, 3. Laura.
Yeah, well, I always advocate for working with an art advisor who can really help to navigate the process. The art world is a very opaque place, and working with an advisor can make sure that you are dealing with reputable galleries like ACA. And then in terms of due diligence, one of the most critical things is always understanding the provenance of the piece, which is the ownership history. The provenance will tell you everything from whether the work has a shady background, if there are any title or ownership issues, if something was stolen, if something was bought or sold between 1935 and 1945, that could be a major red flag. And then it will also play into the authenticity. If something doesn't have a history that makes sense, there's a good chance the piece could be a forgery.
Thank you, Laura. Jason.
It's sort of a checklist. So you have provenance, condition based on medium. For example, egg tempera painting is a very tricky medium. It should be examined very closely. You want to buy some, due diligence is also buying the right work by the right artist. So I'll throw something out. Here's Guy Wiggins, an American Impressionist. You can have 3 different subjects and 3 vastly different prices. A Guy Wiggins snow scene of Fifth Avenue with all the cars and flags, that could be $125,000. A still life, because it's the wrong composition, could be $15,000. Another landscape could be $25,000. So it's very much about finding the right composition, the right subject, not getting stuck into anything that's atypical. Provenance, condition, and then developing a relationship with the gallery, buying into the right eye of the gallery.
Thank you. Dorian.
I don't want to repeat so much. I mean, it depends whether you're a seasoned collector or a new collector. The important thing is you do your research. Look to see what you like. And then once you see what you like, then I guess you can then look into the provenance, the condition, all of these factors.
Thank you. Anything you want to add?
I'm going to add value. You need to make sure you're not going to overpay. As was mentioned, Laura mentioned, it's not a transparent industry. And you don't always understand what the profit margins are, and nor will you. But there's enough data, as Dorian said, to research within the market and understand, are you buying something at the equivalent price? So for example, like Jason mentioned with the Guy Wiggins, are you buying the Guy Wiggins still life at the price point of that $15,000? Or are you overpaying for that because maybe you didn't do your research and understand the market? So you definitely want to make sure you understand the value of what you're buying as well. And always buy the best that you can afford.
Correct.
All right, so you've decided to buy art. You've done your due diligence. Now, what are the pros and cons of buying from an auction house or an art gallery versus an art gallery? What are the pros and cons?
You say, Jason.
Yes, whatever you want.
So I would say that it's a very dissimilar, the relationship. When you buy from a gallery, it's an educational process. The gallery, if it's a good gallery, will take time to talk to you about individual objects, educate you, talk about fakes, talk about a black light, show you how to use a black light. It'll talk about, is this artist worthy? Is he being collected by museums? Is he on the rise? Is it something that's being propped up by a gallery and it's more gallery publications? That is a great relationship. So when you have the right galleries, you're buying into their eye because the art on the wall is sort of vetted. They stand behind the work. Auctions are a very interesting realm because when you go to an auction, it can be a minefield. Yeah. You can lose like a part of your body. I mean, it can be really, really bad. I mean, it sounds funny, but it's true. In fact, historically, auctions are also a dumping ground for paintings that are problematic. So if you go to the auction and you don't have an advisor or you don't have a great reference library, you're in trouble. So auctions are not about a relationship, it's about an opportunity. And to get that opportunity, you better study and you better have great advice. There are great things at auction, but the key is great knowledge and depth.
Anybody wants to add anything?
I'll add on to that. The one thing you have to be aware of, like Jason mentioned, it comes back to knowledge. So if you're going to go to a gallery, they are going to spend time with you to educate. That's part of the service that Dorian would provide, is to educate you, the buyer, the new buyer potentially to this asset class. The auction house has specialists, so you're always welcome to reach out to the specialists to discuss pieces. But the other thing to keep in mind with the auction houses is they also do private sales, okay? So if you are actually interested in a certain artist, particularly an artist that has a very strong secondary market, you can always approach the auction house because they actually might have a buyer who's selling privately through that particular venue. The other thing that we find is a plus on the auction side is I'm going to use an object like jewelry. If you have a piece of jewelry, particularly a fancy colored diamond right now, if you were to go to your local jeweler may or may not have access to the global market. But auction houses, they do have access to the global market. And they're going to take that fancy colored diamond and it's going to go to London, Geneva, Dubai, Hong Kong, and then back to New York. Because there's a real high probability that the purchaser of that fancy colored diamond is going to be a global client. So it really depends on the luxury object that you're looking to acquire or you're looking to sell, whether or not a gallery would be a better suited situation or an auction house would be a better suited situation.
It also depends how quick you have to sell.
Exactly.
If you have to sell like that, you take a chance. The auction may sell it quickly. If it doesn't sell, it gets what we call burned, so you can't sell it. If you have time, then you go to a gallery and they can properly, market it and do the right thing. So it's kind of like that.
Great. Look, I mean, I've never been very keen on buying art or diamonds because I don't trust anybody in this business, honestly. Honest to God, it's all fuzzy, so fuzzy. Mm-hmm. Value is so fuzzy, and I don't know how to protect the value of this investment. How do you protect the value? how do you recognize or see fakes, forgeries? So many of them, and so some of them are so skillfully done. I mean, even an expert cannot recognize them. I'm going to recognize them. So, I mean, it's very fuzzy. So give me some comfort here. Why would somebody really invest in that? Or how do you recognize that or see that? Or what measures do you take if you see that this is a fake or forgery, you know, other than reporting them to the police? But, I mean, give us some ideas here.
Yeah, so I'll
Any
take
comments?
that. So,
Especially Mrs.
yeah.
Schubb here.
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, fakes and forgeries certainly come up. Probably once every few months, I have a client that reaches out to me because they've discovered that their piece is actually a forgery. And then I have to tell them that you can't insure against authenticity. So it's never an easy conversation. And some of these forgeries are incredibly skillfully done. Others probably would have been very easily spotted had they worked with someone that you know, was able to provide guidance and advise them on that piece is clearly not by that artist. I would say that, again, it comes back to understanding where you're buying from, understanding the provenance of that piece. I don't know if anyone followed the Knoedler scandal a few years ago, but it was a very well-known gallery on the Upper East Side that had been around for over 100 years. And they were selling multi-million-dollar works by very well-known blue-chip 20th century artists that turned out to be painted by a Chinese artist in his garage in Queens. But those works were selling for, I believe, north of $5 million. And in that instance, they had forged a lot of the provenance documentation. There was a lot of gaps in the history around those pieces. So again, you need to know who you're working with. You had also asked about protecting the value of pieces.
Yes.
I mean, if something is authentic, I always tell clients that one of the most important things they can do to protect the value is to make sure that they're getting updated appraisals done on a regular basis. Especially with the post-war and contemporary market segments, we're seeing huge growth with some artists, and if you're not updating those values every usually 2 to 4 years, then you risk becoming significantly underinsured if the piece is covered, which it should be.
Laura, I will make sure to call you next time I'm buying art. Thank you very much, really. Oh, all right, Jason, go ahead.
So the fakers often follow auction prices. I'll give you an example. There's a sort of an esoteric artist named Dale Nichols. Now his prices have gone up a lot, and all of a sudden you see Dale Nichols fakes. So the fakers are very much about following the market, believe it or not. And when they follow the market, they'll see, you know, where the strength of the market goes, and they'll sort of do their hocus pocus. There are techniques, though. Speaking of hocus pocus, there are techniques when you get involved in connoisseurship, which we'll probably talk about later. There's ways of actually taking an object and using ultraviolet light, and that's something that when you get involved in collecting, you know how to use this light, and certain areas of the object will fluoresce darker, and that's where restoration is or fakery. You know. Also, there's so that's part of. There are techniques to sort of put you at ease that we use.
Thank you.
So you know, it's easier to feel. It's a better feeling when you're buying.
Yeah, and then there's also other research processes. So if you're looking to buy a blue chip artist, there's a good chance there might be a catalog raisonné. So part of our due diligence process is we always have to check the catalog raisonnés if they exist to verify that that piece actually has been documented. In other cases, it might need approval by a foundation. So for example, Alexander Calder, who's a very, very well-known both painter and does a lot of the mobiles, in order for a piece to be considered created in the hand of Alexander Calder, it needs to be approved by the foundation, and the foundation needs to give the piece a number. So if you're going to buy an Alexander Calder and it hasn't been looked at by the foundation, there's no number, run the other way, because that is a requirement in order for it to be really considered done in the hand of that artist. So it goes back to just doing some basic due diligence, particularly prior to acquisition when you're looking at, particularly in the realm of blue chip art.
That's a very good point. Thank you. We appreciate it. Okay, can you share a concrete example of how art has increased in value over time? Specific piece of art?
Over what period of time?
Over the last 10, 15 years. Since 2008 crisis,
Oh,
or 2007, or pre-crisis. You know, the last decade.
So I can do that. So contemporary art right now is a very hot topic. There's a lot of interest in contemporary art. I think it's sort of a minefield and sort of a challenge, and I think you have to be have discretion and make wise choices in contemporary art, because it's a very, my opinion, it's a very much inflated. It depends upon the artist, you know. So I'll give you sort of an exaggerated example. You probably like this.
Yeah.
So Kerry James Marshall, who's now a big name African-American artist, who's had a show in 3 museums, including the Met Brewer. His paintings in 2003 were $150,000. All the interest is, again, typical. You want the great example. You don't want something atypical. You want a great subject.
Yeah.
So now his paintings are in the $3-4 million range. That's because of the demand for African-American art, which we'll probably, again, talk about later. So there's a lot of interest in African-American art. There's an example.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Laura, you wanna add?
From our perspective, we have a number of clients that were friends with artists. They started collecting back in the 60s. We have one client that used to go on double dates with Mark Rothko and his wife all the time. And a number of those clients, they're thinking about their art really as a passion. They're really not thinking about their collections with the same rigor that they might put around other financial assets. So we often see that those clients are leaving items on their insurance schedules for the purchase price. We had one client a few years ago that had a different client from the double date Mark Rothko client, but another client had a Mark Rothko and she had it insured under her blanket policy, so we actually weren't even aware of it. Blanket policies usually have a per item limit, so in this case it was insured for $50,000 would have been the max if there was a loss. She was doing some estate planning. Christie's came in and did an appraisal, and that piece came back in at $5.6 million. So if something had happened to that piece, her heirs would have significantly lost out on the value of that collection. I think that when you look at a lot of those really blue chip abstract expressionist artists, that's where the market has really shot up. And we have clients that have their collections appraised every few years, and in some cases they're almost doubling in value. From a contemporary perspective, people like Jeff Koons, Christopher Wool, there's a lot of artists right now that are really hot, and you might have bought something for $1 million and now it's worth 3 times that. So I think there's a lot of examples in terms of contemporary pieces, but certainly those are the markets that see the most growth.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, Dorian?
I think from our perspective, if an artist is in the history books and is in museums, a known artist, for over 80 years, all of the artists who are in those categories have increased in value. It's just a question of how much and at what time. There'll be artists who are super hot certain periods, and then they fall out. It's always cyclical. So we definitely champion American art. In the 90s, it was the height of the market, of the American art market, where Bill Gates in 1994 spent $30 million on a Leonardo da Vinci Codex. It's a 72-page manuscript. 4 years later, he spent the same amount of money, $30 million, on a Winslow Homer. Now, that's an American artist. Everybody knows Leonardo da Vinci. How many of you know Winslow Homer? He's an important American artist, but it shows how important American artist, but it goes like this.
Yeah, I agree.
Basically, if you're in the books and in the museums.
Yeah, I agree with Dorian, as well as what Laura and Jason have said. We see great fluctuation. We see exactly what Laura sees, where people might have put something on an insurance policy 10, 15, 20 years ago and haven't looked at it since, and the values have significantly changed. We see the same situation in other areas, whether it's maybe a Bucks County Impressionist painting or a Western art, where 10 to 15 years ago, the market was really, really, really strong. And now, unfortunately, that since the 2008, 2009 recession, that market has really fallen off. It's starting to come back up, but it's not where it was, say, at a 10 to 15-year period in the past. So it does change. It doesn't change as rapidly as the stock market, But there is movement, and it's important to keep up with that movement.
Okay, I have one more question, then I'm going to leave it up to the audience. I'm sure they have a lot of questions. What's really the most important advice, each one of you would give collectors or investors, whether new or seasoned ones? One advice, not a list, just one advice. Go ahead, Jason.
I would pursue quality over name. So I'll give you an example. I was in Florida, and I was sort of giving a heads up of this great collection that had Jasper Johns and I mean, it had all of the great names, you know, the bells and whistles. And I went there, and the collection was a total letdown because it was all about autographs. It wasn't about quality. So my theme and my message to you is you don't need to collect and with the object that, you know, eventually will be a good investment, you know, 10 plus years, is you can buy, it's often better to have a third tier artist who's not as well known and have a masterpiece by a third tier artist rather than an insignificant work by a more famous artist. And I've demonstrated that in my own things. I mean, I have paintings that are by third tier artists, and I have people that are just begging me to acquire it, and I won't do it. And it was, in retrospect, astute, because I went after, it was all about connoisseurship, and I didn't go for, a Jasper Johns watercolor. I went, or a Ben Schoen water. I went for something, whether it's Ben Schoen or Edward Hopper, I went for something really great, even if it's third tier.
Very smart. Anything to add? Colleen, Dorian?
I'm going to just repeat what I said before. Buy the best that you can afford if you're going to acquire. Buy the very best that you can afford within your price range. If you're going to sell, do your research. Make sure you're selling at the right time with the right venue to achieve the highest return.
Thank you, guys. Okay, we'll leave it up to the audience now. Now, those on this side can go to the mic here and ask their questions. Those on that side, to this mic, ask their questions. Go ahead. If you don't have any questions, no, you go. You have a loud, big mouth. Good, I like that. Go ahead. I like that.
I have to add to your story about Noller.
Yeah.
That the woman, Gladys Rosales, who caused all that problems, 30 years before, we shut her down. She tried to do it. We introduced the FBI to Gladys Rosales, and they threw her in jail. And then she rose her ugly little.
So what is your question? What is your question, sir?
I'm just saying,
I understand,
You have a
but
I
this is
didn't know
not
she
for
had
comments.
a past history.
Excuse me.
I didn't have a question. I had something.
So please, no comments. I need questions. This is not comments. No knowledge. I'm sorry. I am a dictator. I'm a dictator. Sorry. I'm a dictator. So you have to accept that. Go ahead.
So the financial markets have gone through a revolution over the last 30 or 40 years where commissions have gone from very high levels on funds and stocks and so on to almost zero. Has there been any revolution in commissions, in the fees, the charges? Is it still 10, 15, 25% to buy and sell collectibles and artwork?
Anyone of you?
Do you want to answer that?
You're talking about the commission that a gallery takes or an auction house takes? Is that the commission you're talking? Anybody?
Huge commissions.
It's not, it's,
In the stock market, they've almost disappeared.
I can answer that if you want. I'll start. So first of all, you have to keep in mind the financial industry is regulated, the art industry is not. Okay, there's minimal regulation.
I like that.
And minimal government. And, right, so because it's not a highly regulated industry, while there are certain industry standards, really, from the standpoint of a commission, whether it's a buyer's commission or a seller's commission, is up to that individual entity. There's not a lot of transparency.
Okay, so I learned something very important today. The art industry is completely unregulated, which I love. That's where the money is. Do you want to invest in a regulated industry or in a totally unregulated industry? This is like the robber barons at the turn of the last century. The Rockefeller, the Morgan, the Carnegie, plenty of opportunities and regulated. I love it. This is the reason why, number one, you should invest in art. Unregulated industry.
No,
Thank
but,
you.
No, but the same code of
Thank you. This is it, John.
Wait,
Great.
I want to say something. First of all, it's on a sliding scale. It depends on how much we're talking about. So it's from 5% to, say, 30%. But as my father-in-law said, you know it's a good deal when everybody's a little unhappy.
So it's basically
But
market.
happy.
Whatever it can
Feeling
sell
about
at.
that.
Whatever it can sell at. Market. Whatever you can sell at. 5%, 6%, 7%, whatever you can get away with. Thank you. Thank
Work
you
it out.
for triggering
okay,
this.
wait, I have to defend the art world, please. So there is a code of ethics in
There's
all
nothing to do
this.
with ethics. It can be unregulated with ethics. Excuse me, unregulated doesn't mean no ethics. Big difference. There's a fine line. Excuse me. Unregulated doesn't mean that no ethics, you know? But thanks for the point. All right, next. Go ahead, my friend.
Hi, how are you? This is a great panel. Thank you for doing this. I have a question, first for the lady at Chubb. A few years ago, I've got an investigative reporting background. Obviously, there was a huge scandal with Sotheby's and Christie, the price fixing and collusion scandal, which really at the heart of the scandal, I think most companies never would have survived such a horrible, horrible thing. So how do you, I know you don't speak for the company, but how did that affect your business and the way you looked at those organizations? And then generally from the panel, how did you feel about that scandal? And do you have confidence in those organizations anymore when there was such corruption at the top?
So for background, for people that aren't familiar with the Christie Sotheby's price fixing scandal, the CEO of both Christie's and Sotheby's were basically meeting and colluding and setting buyers' premiums and sellers' premiums because they felt like they were both constantly undercutting each other and they just wanted to match rates essentially and compete over other things. So, I mean, as a result of that, Alfred Taubman went to jail. Sotheby's actually sold his collection, I think in 2015. I would say that, you know, now there is more regulation on that side. There's a lot more oversight. We have confidence in all of the major auction houses. I don't think that, you know, I don't think those issues exist anymore, obviously, because of the repercussions from that. And Christie's sort of got away with everything. It was really more Sotheby's that felt the pain of that. But I would say in general, I mean, we have confidence in both auction houses. Our clients work closely with them. You know, we insure pieces that are going into those facilities. So from my perspective, it hasn't changed how we approach doing business with them. I don't know if anyone feels differently or...
I'll add on. You have to keep in mind, and it's really any auction house, it is set up as a buyer beware. It's just, again, it goes back to due diligence. They're very professional, though. The auction houses hire specialists and for certain types of auctions, and they're very knowledgeable in their field, but it is a buyer beware situation. The other thing to keep in mind is everything is negotiable.
I like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Hello, not to make light of the stock market, but if you have a few $1,000s and you want to put it in the S&P 500, as shifting and changing minute to minute, day to day it is, you can do so. In the art field, how can you convey how crucial it is to have those interested in investing in art understand that it's a lifelong education standpoint? You know, Chuck Close is not good this year. Duchamp is good. Hopper, etc. It takes intuition. It takes decades. What are you doing to explain how crucial that part of understanding the market is over long periods of time?
Well, it's all about education. I think you have to, first of all, I think you have to be passionate about art. So you have to look at art. You have to go to galleries and auctions and openings and museums, and you just have to fill yourself, like Jason said, with art. And so you get a feeling for it. You read about it in the newspapers, the books, the library. It's kind of everywhere. And then you have an advisor, I feel, so who you can rely on, who could say, who has a pulse on the market, and to advise you. But it's for the long term. I mean, sometimes, we have stories where you can flip it, where there's a story for everything, where you have something for 40 years, 50 years, 1 year, one day, and you could sell it. So
Let me use a Donald Trump line. I have a huge library.
What's wrong with that?
I have one of the best libraries, and I'm very proud of it. And one of the secrets to my success, and there's still a lot of things that are not on the internet. You can get false reads on the internet. You can't, for example, if you're trying to buy a painting on the internet, you can get a false read. You don't get texture, you don't get pure color, you don't get a lot of things. So the books are really important. So I'm very proud of a library. And whenever I talk to somebody, in fact, there's a guy who was just going through this crazy thing and buying. I told him, you need to go cold turkey, no more buying. Buy the book of the artist that you like, go through the book and see the examples that you like, because otherwise it's like tossing a frisbee in the wind. You don't know what you're doing.
And also live at Sotheby's.
You need to know the art.
Live at Sotheby's.
And then the other thing, last thing, is the time horizon on art is at least 10 years plus. It's not liquid. Right. And so it's an educational process. It's a connoisseurship process. So it's 10 years, and it has to be like play money. It's not money you need that you're utilizing for every day. It has to be, other money that you don't care about that's more, it's not liquid. So you know that.
I'll add to that. So we have a number of clients now that we're seeing that are purely collecting for investment purposes. For the most part, they're working with advisors because those people that are collecting are really not art people, and so they're relying on the advisor to guide them through that process. But there's also a lot of resources out there if you're looking to sort of get more market data. There's a number of subscription sites that publish auction results. They aggregate those numbers. There's a site called Art Price where you can see an artist's trajectory. But again, that's only at auction, which is probably a little bit less than half of the market. But it does give you a bit of a snapshot of where that artist market is. And with Art Price, you can even compare it to the S&P 500 to see how that artist has done relative to the market.
However, you can get a false read because sometimes the best work is not showing up at auction. So, there's an artist I know, and the auction price is $2,000 to $3,000. I know of a painting that I have, 5 or 6 people that would pay $150,000 for this painting. It's a tremendous painting. But if you look at the database, you get a false read. You don't get a feeling of what is his best work at auction.
It's half the market.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to ask a question more. Since this is, as a businessman, okay, I look at this, I'm learning a lot today, honest to God. So, this is a very unregulated market, number one. Yes. This is a market where if you sell to ignorant people somewhere in, I'm not going to name a continent, I don't want to sound, there's a huge arbitrage here where you can make, these are not westernized people who understand Western art. But these invest for art for the sake of art. You can do a markup like crazy. And who's here to regulate you, to tell you this is worth, etc. It's a question of demand and supply. So it defies stock market or bond market or any market expectations, even in a short period of time, not a long period of time. So you're beating everything here, all the odds here. If somebody makes it his specialty. So, there's a huge opportunities here in this market that are not seen, or met by, the average Joe out there. Isn't it? Am I correct? Yes? Thank you.
It's about rarity and how you define rarity. Quality, period, artist. You know, it's about rarity, and that's sort of what makes things go price.
I love it. Thank you.
Supply and demand, you know.
Thank you, Jay. Go ahead, Charles.
So that actually goes right into my question in terms of supply and demand. So you mentioned the oil industry, Ziad, how you can actually, you know, it's considered arbitrary. Well, oil is a little bit more regulated. You can actually set a price. You can have supply and demand.
Yeah.
But the issue that I'm finding with this is, and Laura, this might be actually your field here, the actual valuation process. So I'm a math guy. I'm not an artist. I like art. If I see something nice, I'll go buy it. But I don't understand the coefficients. In other words, how do you set a valuation to the art, the initial valuation? What are the degrees of freedom involved? And then based on that, I mean, the valuation, and then how does that valuation sustain? I mean, is that based on supply and demand? If you only have one, is it based on how many people want it? Or what are the different factors in order for there to be some transparency to this process?
Thank you, Charles. Thank you.
Yeah. So we do not value items in-house because it would be a conflict of interest since we're charging a premium on that. That would be done by Colleen and an independent appraiser, so I'll let her answer that question.
Colleen?
So from the standpoint of valuation, there's a lot of different aspects to determine the value. And it's a lot of the issues that we've already presented tonight. The rarity, the provenance, the quality, the condition, and then of course the market. There is subjectivity. It's not a logarithm, it's not an algorithm, there is some subjectivity to determining the actual value of a piece, but it is all based on historical data. So you have to take a look at what has happened in the past and what is happening currently in the market, and it's an aggregation of that data to determine what that actual value is. And yes, you are right, the values can change. They can go upward or they can go downward. So as Laura mentioned earlier, we agree with Laura's statement. We always recommend that clients keep on top of what that value might be. Don't wait 10 years to reconsider what that might be in the particular marketplace, because if there is some type of a loss and there's been a significant appreciation with that particular artwork or luxury object, you're not going to be able to recoup the full value if you don't have it appropriately documented.
Thank you, Colleen. Global Mark.
Thank you, Global Mark. Now we're going to talk about facts and figures. Specifics, please, experts, specifics. What we're looking for is the question is who are the leading buyers and investors of the top luxury works of art and pieces in the world? New York, where we live, United States as a whole, the world, worldwide, China. And please break it down. Private, institutionals, governments. Give us specifics. We're action-oriented here. We want to know who those people are. And not only that, what are they buying? What's the capital? Give us the framework. Starting with you.
I'm going to check my phone.
Okay, I can start. I'll start.
You see how ruthless they can be?
No, I can start. First of all, I'm going to preface by saying it depends on the asset class. So do you want to just talk about art, or do you want to talk about luxury assets in general?
Let's talk about art and luxury.
Okay. So from the standpoint of art, again, it fluctuates. The U.S. is definitely in the lead compared to China and Europe and other geographic regions in the world. From the standpoint of private versus public, as Laura mentioned earlier, from the transaction perspective, I'd say less than half is actually auction. More is done privately. And that is recognized by the fact that there are a significant number of art fairs. So you need to keep in mind of where are people buying? Where is this art being shown? So auction is one venue, but then you have the art fairs. And then you also have brick and mortar. So you have a lot of different opportunities to acquire art. And those venues, particularly from the fair perspective, that is continuing to grow globally. Okay, so you have more access, you have more artists, and you have more buyers.
The question was, who are they?
The
We
names?
want specifics, yes.
Well, that's confidential.
You can't release information about any one of the private investors.
Nope.
That's for the
Institutionals?
That's for the next panel, and the ticket is $250.
You can,
Look, I mean,
If you read the headlines, you can see
I
a lot
fully
of those
understand.
names.
This is a public information, but maybe in private that's a different discussion, a private discussion. But I tell you, but I know a lot of. I personally know a lot of. I mean, some of the characters that invest mostly in that is the people who run very big hedge fund and venture groups. They are actually collectors of art, and they spend. Some of them, we talked about, and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars buying art. So these are most of them are U.S. New York-based Americans.
Mr. Deripaska, you recognize this name? Is one of the largest art buyers in the world. And so I'm surprised. This is public information. It's available publicly. We know what he purchased. So all I was asking for, because it's auction-oriented audience, who do we go with? Who do we go to if we want to broker a transaction in buying and selling luxury art?
I understand their privacy here. We can talk about it in private market. But this is a very good question. It's a very fair question. Nothing.
I can actually answer that question.
That's very nice of you. Go ahead.
Because that's not confidential.
No, please. I mean, this is a big family.
Okay, no. I mean, but from the the buyers and sellers are confidential, and that has to mean that we sign confidentiality agreements all the time. If you're thinking, if you have an object that you'd like to buy or you'd like to sell, you could actually talk to any of us on the panel, and we could assist with that transaction.
What amounts? Which amounts do you deal with? What is the minimum and maximum amounts that you would work with? What amounts have you dealt with that you are comfortable?
From $1,000 to $20 million. It's a range. A few, and but just personally.
Okay, Mark, I think enough questions. Thank you very much, Mark. Go ahead, sir.
Ziad, I'd like to thank you for putting on this panel.
My pleasure.
And the question I have today is, how is it that, well, firstly, artists traditionally consider art made by the artist, right? He touched it, somehow was involved with the work. How is it now that we have art that's put out that the artist has not even touched, and it's worth millions?
That's happened for a long time. I mean, you could go back to the Renaissance era. They had studios. Andy Warhol had a factory of artists. Jeff Koons doesn't fabricate his sculptures. He works with other people. I mean, I think it's about coming up with a concept, and I don't think that's a new thing. There's always been artists, forever that have worked with other studio assistants or fabricators, or Warhol would just sign his things. Damien Hirst does spot paintings. He doesn't paint any of the spots. He just signs them. And there was a story about someone from his studio that had painted his spots. They're literally just big dots on a canvas. And she asked him if she could take it home, and he said, well, you can, but I'm not going to sign it, so it's not going to be worth anything. But his signature, automatically makes it worth probably $50,000 up to six figures. So.
Right, but how does that happen?
How does that happen?
Right.
I mean, I think it comes down to desirability for that artist's work, and they're coming up with a concept of it. I think when you're mass producing art in some cases like that it's expected that you're going to have assistants that are involved in the process.
The concept, the concept is as important as the technique.
Mm-hmm.
So like Donald Judd, I mean, and when you're dealing with a lot of these very conceptual objects, because a lot of these things can be reproduced. I mean, the light and space movement in California, where they use a lot of acrylic. I mean, these are great objects. So because you're dealing with something that is very conceptual, provenance is extremely important, because the theory is that other people can do it. Mm-hmm. So provenance becomes extremely important with some of these objects. So that's what you buy. You're buying, an important concept, a movement, and that's what you're buying into. There's more. The interest today now is very instinctual. There's less interest in craft in general, and more and a lot of things that are more abstract, instinctual. I mean, in general. Kerry James Marshall is what I mentioned before. Is both. So.
Okay, thank you.
So, wait, I just want to say one thing.
Go ahead.
So I think what everybody's saying is that imagination and innovation is really the currency of art. Mm-hmm. And that if you did it first, and it doesn't matter who else did it like Jackson Pollock. He did it first. There's a lot of Jackson Pollocks out there. But the important thing is the artist who really did it first and imagined it. And that's what the value is.
I know.
Can any of you speak a little bit towards finding the kind of the up-and-coming artists, these gems, really early on when nobody else knows about these people, maybe nobody's really seen their work, because most artists do struggle with the business side of things. So you find these great creative minds who can't really develop themselves and get themselves out there. Can you speak a little bit towards where you're finding this, how you're finding this, are you finding this? And what is that value? Because that can almost be like, it's like buying the right penny stock, right?
Yeah. Good question.
Well, I think there's some galleries that are better at this than others. So it's very much developing a good relationship. You know, they're collectors. You know, when everybody talks about the dealer has the ability, you know, it's important you work with an ethical dealer. But you need a relationship, and there are collectors that are not ethical. You know, you need to have someone who's very honest, you know, like walk in, what's your price point? You know, there is synergy there. When you develop that synergy, they'll say, well, he's showing at such and such art museum, you know, or he just entered this collection, or his work is in this up-and-coming show that's very interesting. So it's very much about, you know, knowing what's going on in the art community, nonprofit and everything.
Thank you.
I'll add one thing to
Go
that.
ahead, Laura.
We have a number of clients that really closely follow and primarily just collect emerging art, and they're going to grad programs that are very well recognized. So like Cal Arts, Yale, Columbia, and they're buying from those MFA thesis exhibitions because that's a great way to get in at a lower price point, and then they hope that their careers will take off. But I think anytime you're collecting from one of those really well-established and well-recognized programs, then you're buying something of quality. So that's another way to approach it.
Great.
And then if I could just add one more thing too, it comes back to the education. So there's a lot, in addition to local art schools, even just the museums. They'll have collector groups, and it's a great way to go, and you get to meet the directors of the museums and other collectors, and you're all sharing information. And really it's about gathering and sharing information as well, plus visiting the galleries, visiting the fairs, and educating yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. Okay, 1, 2, 3 more questions. That's it. Go ahead.
I hope we're not being too repetitive, but you are at the Financial Policy Council. A lot of us think in logical, mathematical, tangible ways. So what I was wondering, again, is more on the valuation side. How is it possible, like I could understand the value of a 64.5 Mustang or a mint condition Tucker or something that's on the rarity side of things. But there are things in the art world that are valued at hundreds of millions of dollars, and they basically defecated on canvas. So, you know, to us, to the logical people, I cannot understand who is sitting in a back room looking at a Hefty Bag commercial glued to a piece of paper and saying, oh, well, that's priceless. That has to be $100 million. Where does that value come from?
Okay, so one thing you have to keep in mind, and this does tend to be confusing, is when you hear auction records, and we hear a lot of record-breaking auction results, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's worth. It just means that two people really wanted it and drove the price up. So you have to keep that in mind when you're talking about value.
Emotional value, not real value.
Exactly, not
Well,
financial.
we
Emotional
understand
value.
The rarity side
Big
of
difference.
it in that I want that object.
So you have to keep that in mind when you hear these auction records, because they are mind-boggling when then you look at the piece and you're trying to equate that financial figure to that particular object. From the standpoint of the actual valuation, it comes back to data and data analysis. Just like any other type of valuation, whether you're looking at valuing real estate or you're looking at valuing art, there has to be data in order for you to come to that conclusion on what it's worth. Now, what would make one piece of, say, potentially contemporary art more valuable than, say, an American artist of a particular time period? a lot of it has to do with the global demand. So there are certain types of artists that are globally desirable. There are other artists that are really desired just more or less domestically, and then there's other artists that are desired just within a specific region. And because of that supply and demand equation, that's really going to impact the value. So it's data, both historical and current, and then looking at all the other aspects that we discussed tonight related to those historical and current data points to come up with what the actual value of that piece is today. And it's different than what it actually might sell for at auction, because it just takes two people to drive a price upward.
Thank you, Colleen. Go ahead, sir.
So thank you for the great panel. I do have a question. So because this industry, it takes so long to understand and master, I hear there's a lot of reliance on advisors, right? Every time you do a deal, you have to have the advisors with you. But the whole point of investing in the industry is to find that gem that you really think is going to skyrocket in value. So my question is, usually advisors, they just know the conventional wisdom. They're not really known to find the gem. So how reliable are they? What makes an art advisor? How do you quantify that?
Well, range, I would say experience. You know, I mean, from my standpoint, I bring a wealth of experience. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. So I would have to say that if you're prepared to do it on your own, be prepared for mistakes. And an advisor, a good advisor, can guide you on quality, find you, I mean, like this gentleman over here was talking about Mustangs. He knows about Mustangs. But how do you know about Mustangs? Because there are books on Mustangs, I'm sure, right? And so just like that, you need to know the volume you turn to, the book on a certain artist, the new books, the old books, the stuff that's out of print, that's not online. So,
that's great.
Does that help?
Yeah, perfect. Carl.
Thank you. Thank you.
Close.
So my question centers around using media to enhance value. So we do product placements in movies and TV shows. So after shows like White Collar came out, Oceans, Thomas Crown Affair, did you see a skyrocket, or did that impact the market in some way, seeing certain pieces and artists after being placed part of those stories?
I don't think so.
Well, it made people wonder whether or not they had a fake.
Okay.
I think that media always it can have a positive and negative, obviously, awareness impact on art. Did it impact the value? No, not necessarily. No, that doesn't have an impact on the value. Does it impact due diligence process? Yes, it makes people more aware of maybe certain processes that they should consider prior to an acquisition to make sure that they are acquiring the actual authentic object at the accurate market price for that point in time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jeff?
A comment or a question?
It's a point of order.
No, I don't want your comments. Only questions.
I'm an art professional. I don't have a question. I have a
Wow.
point of order.
So you should sit here.
You wanted the wow.
Go ahead. Don't worry about it.
I just wanted to say
Go easy on them, Ziad.
one that the entire art market annually
Yes.
is all of maybe $5 billion.
That's it?
It's a grain of sand
Yep.
next to what you guys usually oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The second thing is that the top price for an individual work of art has been hovering around $300 million for an individual work of art. And those two works are, at the moment, a Raphael and a de Kooning from 1948.
So what's the point you're trying to make?
The point is, I wanted to put the art market into perspective, because you guys think about numbers, and those are the numbers. You got it?
So I got it.
All right, thank you. My husband's going to get me in trouble.
Thanks a lot, Jeffrey, for your feedback. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming. We can have a talk sometime outside, somewhere outside. Our next event is on September 2nd. Mark your calendars. We're going to have also this event with Freedom Fest in July 19th to 22nd. I really hope to see some of you there. Some of you have already registered. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great evening.
I thought we were going to go another hour. No, it was a joke. It was a joke.
In private.
Joke.
Thank you.
Thank you.